Imagine waking up in California in 2025 and realizing that the cost of your rent alone has jumped higher than the price of gas during a summer road trip. One eyebrow-raising statistic sets the stage. The median home price in California still hovers around $800,000, nearly double the national average, while the state is simultaneously leading the nation in outbound migration. How can the most desirable postcard in America be the same place people are fleeing like it's on fire? That paradox is the heartbeat of this story. California has long been marketed as the land of golden beaches, avocado toast, and sunshine that never quits. But beneath the Instagram filters is a brutal reality. Families paying over half their income just to keep a roof overhead, young professionals surrendering dreams of homeownership, and retirees realizing that their pensions buy them far less in Los Angeles than in, say, Phoenix or Boise. And here's the kicker: the supposed bubble of prosperity may actually be a bubble about to burst. The question is not just whether California homes are overpriced. It's whether the combined weight of sky-high mortgages, escalating insurance premiums, and day-to-day living expenses is slowly suffocating the middle class. Think of it like owning the latest iPhone. It dazzles at first, but by the second year, the battery drains faster than your bank account. California is dazzling, but it's draining too. So tonight, we're diving deep into the warning signs of a housing crash across 10 California cities. But this isn't just about bricks and mortgages, it's about what those warning signs reveal about the cost of living in America as a whole. If California, the supposed land of dreams, is teetering, what hope do the rest of us have? Stay with me, because by the end of this list, you might start rethinking whether paying $18 for a salad and $3,000 for a one-bedroom is truly worth the sunshine. Before we jump into the countdown of troubled cities, let's set the ground rules. You might be wondering, how do we decide which California spots make the danger zone list? It's not just about who has the priciest homes or the fanciest coffee shops charging $8 a latte. The criteria here are a cocktail housing affordability, median income versus home price, inventory levels, the number of listings sitting like forgotten leftovers in the fridge, and, of course, those hidden costs that turn living in California into a high-stakes poker game. We're also factoring in cost of living indicators that often get ignored. Because let's face it, what good is buying a home in Riverside if you're spending half your paycheck on car insurance and the other half on tacos and electricity bills? And yes, we'll sprinkle in data from reliable sources like Zillow, Redfin, and state housing reports. But don't worry, no boring lectures here. Think of it more like a tour through California's neighborhoods, with a sarcastic friend who points out the cracks in the stucco while sipping cold brew. So buckle up, because the ride through California's top 10 housing headaches is about to begin. Bakersfield, the oil town running on empty. Bakersfield has always been California's blue-collar workhorse, built on oil rigs, country music, and affordable houses that once drew families priced out of coastal cities. But in 2025, affordability is starting to look more like a mirage, shimmering above Highway 99. Median home prices here hover around the mid-$370,000s, cheaper than Los Angeles, sure. But when local incomes struggle to break past $60,000 a year, that cheap label starts peeling off fast. Here's the plot twist. It's not just about home prices. Insurance premiums in Kern County are climbing thanks to wildfire maps, even though most locals would joke, "What trees?" At the same time, Bakersfield's housing inventory is stacking up like unsold donuts at the end of the workday. More listings, fewer buyers. It's a recipe that even a high school economics teacher would recognize as trouble. But the real kicker is what this says about the cost of living in America. Bakersfield used to be the place you moved to escape California's overpriced circus. Now even the cheap option is swallowing up paychecks. If this so-called safety valve is starting to leak, what happens to the rest of the system? So, is Bakersfield crashing? Or is it just taking a breather while everyone pretends gas station burritos count as fine dining? Either way, it earns its spot at number 10. Stockton, the Delta City balancing on thin ice. Stockton has a history of making headlines for the wrong reasons. Remember 2012, when it became the largest U.S. city to declare bankruptcy? Well, in 2025, the shadow of that legacy hasn't entirely faded. Median home prices here sit just under $500,000, which sounds like a bargain compared to San Francisco, but stack that against a local median income barely touching $70,000, and suddenly the math looks less like a dream and more like a bad algebra test. Then there's the geography. Stockton sits on the edge of the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta, a region increasingly flagged for flood risk. FEMA maps aren't exactly bedtime reading, but here they're the nightmare under the bed. Insurance companies know it, homeowners feel it, and premiums keep climbing. Add in the fact that listings are lingering longer than usual, houses staying on the market past 60 days like awkward guests who won't leave, and the bubble burst metaphor starts to feel more like a leaky dam. What does this tell us about the cost of living in America? Stockton used to be where Bay Area escapees ran to stretch their dollars. But now, with higher insurance, rising food and gas prices, and housing that still eats half a paycheck, Stockton looks less like an escape hatch and more like a pressure cooker. So the question isn't just whether Stockton is slipping back into crisis, it's whether the American promise of move inland, save money is finally expiring. And if it can't hold together here, where does that leave everyone else? Riverside. Sunshine with a side of sticker shock. Riverside has always sold itself as the Inland Empire's hidden gem close enough to Los Angeles to borrow its glamour, far enough to avoid its chaos. At least, that was the pitch. In 2025, the reality feels more like paying premium prices for a knockoff handbag. Median home prices here hover in the $570,000 range, while the average household income struggles around $75,000. That's like trying to fill up a Tesla with pocket change. It just doesn't add up. The affordability crunch isn't the only red flag. Mortgage burdens are stretching families thin, with monthly payments often swallowing 45 to 50% of take-home pay. And if you thought the commute to LA was the worst part of living here, wait until you see the grocery receipts. Rising costs for basics like food and gas mean Riverside families are budgeting like contestants on a survival reality show. And the cost of living angle? Riverside is the classic example of the American middle-class squeeze. It was supposed to be the place where hardworking families could buy bigger homes with backyards instead of shoebox condos. Instead, they're stuck choosing between paying the mortgage or taking a modest vacation. When the affordable alternative feels unaffordable, the system starts to look broken. So here's the million-dollar question. Is Riverside just experiencing growing pains, or is it quietly morphing into another overpriced outpost of Southern California? One thing's for sure, if the Inland Empire is cracking, the ripple effects for the broader American cost of living crisis are only just beginning. Lancaster. Desert dreams turning dusty. Lancaster, tucked away in the Antelope Valley, has long been marketed as the place where families could find bigger houses without Hollywood prices. Drive a little farther into the desert, the story went, and you discover affordability with wide open skies. But in 2025, that dream feels more like a mirage on a scorching highway. Median home prices now push past $450,000, while the average household income lingers closer to $65,000. On paper, that gap looks manageable, but in practice, it's like trying to build a sandcastle while the tide's rolling in. The housing inventory here has ballooned. Sellers are waiting, buyers are hesitating, and for sale signs linger like faded yard ornaments. Mortgage rates only add to the chill, turning what should be an entry-level market into a gamble that many families aren't willing to take. And then there's the insurance problem. Wildfire risk maps are expanding into areas once thought safe, driving up premiums even in these desert communities. When we talk about the cost of living in America, Lancaster highlights a brutal irony. The city once positioned as the affordable escape hatch from LA is itself becoming out of reach. Residents who moved here for breathing room are now gasping under financial pressure, wondering if they traded short commutes for long-term debt. So here's the question. Is Lancaster still the land of opportunity, or is it just another chapter in California's housing paradox where the cheap seats aren't cheap anymore and the middle class finds itself priced out even in the desert? Santa Maria. Coastal calm. Financial storm. Santa Maria sits quietly on California's central coast, far from the hustle of Los Angeles and San Francisco. It's the kind of place people imagine when they dream of escaping traffic jams and endless smog, a slower pace, vineyards nearby, and ocean breezes that make you forget about city chaos. But in 2025, the calm exterior hides a stormy financial reality. Median home prices hover just under $600,000, while household incomes average closer to $70,000. On the surface, it's charming. Underneath, it's suffocating. What's fueling the tension? For one, housing inventory has climbed like sourdough starters during lockdown. Too many listings, not enough takers. Add in higher mortgage rates, and you get families eyeing the market like cautious diners at an overpriced restaurant, tempted by the menu but unwilling to order. Insurance costs are also creeping upward as wildfire and flood maps expand across the Central Coast, making ownership less of a dream and more of a gamble. And here's where the cost of living crisis sharpens the edge. Santa Maria was once pitched as a cheaper alternative to Santa Barbara, a place where working families could afford homes without needing Hollywood paychecks. But rising grocery costs, transportation expenses, and utilities are erasing that advantage. It's like buying a discounted vacation package, only to find out the hidden resort fees cost more than the trip itself. So, is Santa Maria still the quiet refuge people hoped for? Or is it morphing into yet another chapter in California's housing crunch where affordability is just another marketing slogan? One thing's certain, when the budget option starts bleeding wallets, the ripple effects reach far beyond one coastal town. Fresno, the middle ground that's losing its balance. Fresno has long been California's somewhere in between. Not as glamorous as San Francisco, not as chaotic as Los Angeles, but right in the center, literally and figuratively. It was supposed to be the place where you could stretch your dollar further, where a median home price around $400,000 still gave families hope of owning a backyard. But in 2025, Fresno's balancing act is starting to wobble. Household incomes hover near $58,000, leaving many buyers staring at mortgages that chew up nearly half their paychecks. Add in property taxes, climbing insurance premiums, and day-to-day costs like groceries and gas, and Fresno families are realizing their affordable compromise feels more like an expensive trap. It's as if the middle ground has become quicksand. You step in thinking you'll be safe, but the more you struggle, the deeper you sink. Then there's the housing supply. Listings are piling up, sellers are trimming prices, and buyers are holding their breath, waiting to see if the floor will drop further. This isn't just a local headache, it mirrors a national dilemma. Fresno used to symbolize the American middle-class dream. Not too rich, not too poor, just steady. But when even Fresno starts looking unaffordable, what message does that send about the broader cost of living in America? The irony is sharp. People once moved here to escape California's coastal madness, only to find themselves trapped in a new version of it. Fresno isn't crashing in dramatic Hollywood style. It's grinding down slowly in a way that erodes confidence, paycheck by paycheck. And that's sometimes scarier because you don't see the collapse. You just wake up one day realizing the ground beneath you has quietly shifted. Chula Vista, San Diego's pricey little sister. Chula Vista, perched just south of San Diego, was once the affordable cousin in a glamorous family. People who couldn't stomach San Diego's million-dollar median prices drove a few miles down the freeway to Chula Vista, where they could still buy a house and keep their bank accounts intact. Fast forward to 2025, and that affordable alternative storyline has gone missing like car keys in a cluttered apartment. Median home prices here are now brushing against the $750,000 mark, while household incomes average closer to $85,000. On paper, that ratio looks slightly better than Los Angeles, but once you factor in high property taxes, sky-high rent for those not buying, and ballooning grocery bills, Chula Vista feels less like a bargain and more like a bait and switch. Families who once came here to build stability now find themselves juggling expenses with the skill of a circus performer, and one missed paycheck could send it all tumbling down. And here's the kicker for the cost of living in America. Chula Vista shows how quickly the spillover effect eats away at working-class dreams. When a major metro like San Diego gets too expensive, the overflow pushes into nearby suburbs. At first, it feels like a win more demand, rising property values, equity growth. But give it a few years, and the very people who sustain those suburbs can no longer afford to stay. That's not just a Chula Vista problem, it's the American affordability problem, zoomed in. So, is Chula Vista still the family-friendly haven it once was? Or has it become San Diego's overpriced waiting room? If the suburbs are losing their affordability edge, then where do ordinary families go next? San Diego, paradise with a price tag. San Diego has always worn the crown as California's sun-drenched paradise. Gorgeous beaches, world-class breweries, the zoo your kids will actually brag about on the surface. It's the stuff postcards are made of. But behind the palm trees and perfect weather lurks one of the steepest affordability cliffs in America. In 2025, median home prices here hover around $900,000, while the average household income sits just north of $100,000. Do the math, and you'll see why San Diegans are sweating long before the summer heat kicks in. Mortgage payments regularly chew through 50% or more of household income, and renting isn't a safe harbor either, with one-bedroom apartments routinely asking for $3,000 or more. Add in California's notorious gas prices, some of the highest utility costs in the nation, and groceries that feel like they're priced by luxury brands, and the city that calls itself America's finest starts to feel like America's most expensive postcard. The bigger issue? San Diego illustrates the national disconnect between wages and the cost of living. Tech workers, military families, and service industry employees all share the same city, but not the same financial reality. Some sip craft beer on rooftop patios, while others debate whether they can afford meat in their weekly groceries. It's a picture-perfect example of how the American dream fractures when housing costs rise faster than incomes. So here's the paradox. San Diego remains a paradise, but one that increasingly caters only to the wealthy or the heavily indebted. For everyone else, the view of the ocean may be free, but staying close enough to enjoy it, that's becoming the real luxury. Oakland, the Bay Area's crumbling middle ground. Oakland has always lived in San Francisco's shadow, close enough to share the Golden Gate's glow, but historically more affordable, more diverse, and more grounded. In 2025, though, Oakland feels less like an alternative and more like collateral damage from the Bay Area's runaway housing experiment. Median home prices hover near $720,000, while household incomes average around $95,000. That ratio might look tolerable on paper, but once you add property taxes, higher crime rates, and insurance premiums climbing faster than BART ticket prices, it paints a darker picture. Inventory has grown, listings are sitting, and price reductions are creeping into a market once thought untouchable. But the deeper concern isn't just housing, it's the cost of living layered on top of it. Groceries, childcare, utilities, and car insurance all run higher than national averages. Families who once saw Oakland as the reasonable choice compared to San Francisco now find themselves drowning just the same, only without the postcard skyline. Oakland embodies the widening gap in America. The wealthy glide above the storm with tech paychecks, while everyone else grinds under the weight of housing costs that no longer match their earnings. It's not just an Oakland problem. And that's the point. It's the American affordability crisis in one microcosm. So is Oakland on the brink of a housing crash, or just slowly deflating like a balloon after the party's over? Either way, it's a sobering reminder that if even the Bay Area's escape hatch is breaking down, the cost of living in America is heading into uncharted territory. Palm Springs, Coachella Valley, luxury living on shaky ground. Palm Springs and the wider Coachella Valley have always carried a certain mystique. Mid-century modern homes with turquoise pools, music festivals that turn deserts into playgrounds, and retirees chasing endless sunshine. On Instagram, it looks like heaven. But in 2025, the numbers tell a different story. Median home prices here flirt with $650,000, while the typical household income in the valley sits closer to $70,000. That's not a gap, it's a canyon. The real estate market here thrives on second homes and short-term rentals, which makes it especially fragile. When the economy cools, luxury buyers and vacation renters are the first to disappear. Inventory has surged, with houses lingering on the market like party guests who didn't realize the music stopped hours ago. Sellers slash prices, but buyers hesitate, waiting for the correction they sense is inevitable. And then there are the hidden costs. Utilities spike in desert summers, air conditioning runs non-stop, and insurance premiums are rising thanks to flood and wildfire risk. For retirees on fixed incomes, the dream of sipping cocktails by the pool can quickly turn into a nightmare of unpaid bills and shrinking savings. Palm Springs is more than a desert paradise. It's a warning label for America. It shows what happens when lifestyle branding collides with economic reality. The American dream of retiring to sunny luxury is colliding head-on with the rising cost of living, forcing families to ask, is paradise still paradise when you can't afford the pool filter? So here it is, the #1 California hotspot flashing red on the housing radar. A reminder that no matter how glamorous the zip code, the laws of math and economics never take a vacation. When you line up Bakersfield, Stockton, Riverside, Lancaster, Santa Maria, Fresno, Chula Vista, San Diego, Oakland, and Palm Springs, it's easy to think this is just another California problem. Sky-high prices, quirky geography, natural disasters. California is the poster child for extremes, right? But if you zoom out, these warning signs are really mirrors reflecting America's deeper cost of living crisis. Here's the uncomfortable truth. California may be more dramatic, but the same pressures are building nationwide. Wages aren't keeping pace with housing, insurance premiums are biting into middle-class budgets, and essential costs, food, childcare, healthcare, keep ballooning. It's the modern version of a magician's trick. Incomes go in one pocket, and expenses vanish out the other, leaving families wondering how their paycheck disappeared before the month is over. Even more striking is the inequality on display. In San Diego, tech workers sip craft cocktails on rooftops, while service workers debate whether to pay rent late or skip the grocery run. In Fresno, teachers and nurses face the same mortgage hurdles as startup founders, but without stock options to cushion the blow. California has become a live experiment in what happens when the dream of upward mobility collides with immovable math. And thanks to social media, these stories aren't hidden. TikToks of frustrated renters in Oakland rack up millions of views. Reddit threads about people fleeing California for Texas or Idaho read like confessionals from a support group. It's not just about housing, it's about dignity, stability, and the shrinking space for the average American to build a life without constant financial anxiety. So, while it's tempting to laugh at California's quirks, the truth is this. If the Golden State, with its wealth, tech, and cultural clout, can't solve its affordability crisis, what hope do smaller states have when the wave inevitably reaches them? California isn't just a warning, it's a preview. So here we are, 10 California cities showing cracks in the housing market, each one telling a piece of the same story. California still dazzles the world with its beaches, mountains, and cultural pull, but for everyday people, the glow comes with a bill that keeps getting bigger. It's the paradox of the Golden State, a dream on postcards, a nightmare on bank statements. But this isn't just California's drama, it's America's dilemma. When even Bakersfield and Fresno, the so-called affordable escapes, start pricing out families, it raises a bigger question about the cost of living across the country. If California is the laboratory for the future, the experiment isn't looking good for the rest of us. So let me throw it back to you. Would you rather pay $3,000 a month for a shoebox apartment in San Diego, or take that same money to own twice the space in a different state? And do you think California is just going through a rough patch, or are we watching the early chapters of a long crash? Comment below, I want to hear where you stand. And if you've made it this far, you clearly care about where America's housing and cost of living are headed. So hit that like button, subscribe for more deep dives, and share this with someone debating whether to stay or go. After all, the American dream is changing fast, and the conversation about what it's worth is just getting started.